9 bodies. 9 experienced hikers. 9 people who knew exactly how to survive in the harshest conditions on Earth. Yet they tore their way out of their own tent in the middle of the night, ran barefoot into temperatures that hit negative 30 degrees Celsius, and died one by one in the snow. Some with crushed skulls. Some with missing eyes. One with her tongue ripped out. And the official cause of death? A compelling natural force. That was it. That was all the Soviet government would say. Until now. Because files that were locked in secret archives for over 60 years have finally been declassified. And what they reveal does not match the story you have heard. Welcome to Mystery Mind. Tonight we are going to the Ural Mountains in the Soviet Union, February 1959. A place called Dead Mountain. The locals had another name for it. They called it the Mountain of the Dead long before 9 hikers ever set foot there. What happened to those 9 people has been called the greatest unsolved mystery in modern history. But new documents have surfaced. Autopsy reports that were hidden. Photographs that were classified. Witness testimonies that were buried. And when you put them together, the picture that emerges is more disturbing than any theory you have heard before. This is not just a story about an avalanche. This is not just a story about hypothermia. This is a story about something that the Soviet government did not want the world to know. And tonight, you are going to know it. The group called themselves the Dyatlov group after their leader, Igor Dyatlov. He was 23 years old, a radio engineering student, and one of the most experienced hikers in the Sverdlovsk region. The trek they planned was challenging but not extreme. They were going to hike 200 kilometers through the northern Urals, reach a mountain called Otorten, and return. It was supposed to take 3 weeks. They were all certified in wilderness survival. They had proper gear. They had experience with sub-zero temperatures. And they kept a detailed diary that would become one of the most analyzed documents in mystery history. The last entry in that diary was dated January 31st, 1959. It was upbeat. They wrote about the weather clearing up. They wrote about their morale being high. They wrote that they were making good time. The next day, February 1st, they began their ascent toward the pass that would later bear their leader's name. Dyatlov Pass. What happened in the next 24 hours would remain locked in secrecy for 6 decades. But the declassified files tell us this much. The weather was not clear. It was getting worse. Visibility was dropping. And they made a critical decision. Instead of pushing through to the tree line where they would have had shelter and firewood, they stopped on the slope of the mountain. They pitched their tent right there on the exposed mountainside. At approximately 5 o'clock in the afternoon, according to photographs developed from their cameras, the tent was up. By 8 o'clock that night, something made them cut their way out from the inside and run into the freezing darkness. The question is what? And the new files suggest we have been looking in the wrong place for the answer. The first bodies were found on February 26, 1959, 26 days after the group had gone missing. Searchers found the tent first. It was standing. But it was empty. And the side facing the slope had been slashed open from the inside. 9 sets of footprints led away from the tent. Some in socks. Some in single shoes. Some barefoot. The temperature that night was between negative 20 and negative 30 degrees Celsius. No one runs into that barefoot unless something is worse than the cold. The footprints led to a large cedar tree about 1.5 kilometers away. Under that tree, searchers found the remains of a small fire. And they found the first 2 bodies. Yuri Krivonishenko and Yuri Doroshenko. Both were wearing only underwear. Their hands were burned from trying to keep the fire alive. They had climbed the tree. Branches were broken up to 5 meters high. Why would experienced hikers climb a tree in sub-zero temperatures? Some researchers believe they were trying to see the tent. Others believe they were trying to escape something on the ground. The official report says nothing about this. Between the tree and the tent, 3 more bodies were found. Dyatlov himself, Zinaida Kolmogorova, and Rustam Slobodin. They were found in positions suggesting they were trying to return to the tent. But they never made it. The autopsy reports, now declassified, reveal something disturbing. Slobodin had a fracture in his skull. The official cause of death for all 5 was hypothermia. But a skull fracture does not happen from cold. It happens from force. And the files reveal that the investigators at the time knew this. They documented it. Then they buried it. It would take 4 more months to find the last 4 bodies. They were buried under 4 meters of snow in a ravine 75 meters from the cedar tree. And this is where the case breaks open. These 4 bodies had injuries that no avalanche could explain. Ludmila Dubinina had multiple broken ribs. Both of her eyeballs were missing. Her tongue had been ripped out. Alexander Zolotaryov had a crushed chest. His eyeballs were also missing. Nikolai Thibault-Brignol had a crushed skull. The force required to cause these injuries was massive. equivalent to a high-speed car crash. Yet there were no external wounds. No bruising. No soft tissue damage. Just shattered bones and missing eyes and a tongue torn from its root. The official explanation was that they fell into the ravine. But the snow where they were found was soft. The ravine was not deep enough. And 4 months in the snow does not explain missing eyeballs or a ripped-out tongue. Something else happened in that ravine. And the declassified files contain witness statements that suggest the Soviet government knew exactly what. The files contain a statement from a Mansi hunter named Ivan Ivanov. The Mansi are indigenous people who have lived in the Urals for thousands of years. They know those mountains. They know the patterns. And they warned the Soviet investigators about something that the official report never mentioned. Ivanov testified that in the days before the hikers died, the Mansi observed strange lights in the sky over Dead Mountain. Not once. Multiple times. Orange orbs. Moving in formation. Descending and ascending in ways that aircraft of 1959 could not manage. The Mansi called them the lights of the dead. And they refused to go near the mountain while the lights were active. This testimony was classified. It was not included in the official investigation. But it was not the only evidence of something unusual in the sky that night. A group of hikers 50 kilometers south of Dyatlov Pass reported seeing bright orange spheres in the sky on February 1, 1959. The same night. The same time frame. Military personnel at a nearby base reported seeing similar lights. And here is where the declassified files become truly disturbing. There are references to radiation detected on some of the hikers' clothing. Specifically on the clothing of Krivonischenko, who had worked at a nuclear facility before the expedition. But the levels were higher than could be explained by his work. And the files show that the clothing was confiscated by the KGB. The radiation reports were removed from the official investigation. The lead investigator, Lev Ivanov, would later state in an interview decades later that he was ordered to stop investigating the case. He was told to close the file. And he was told never to speak about the orange lights. But the files reveal something else. Something that connects the injuries to the lights. The 4 bodies found in the ravine showed signs of intense pressure. Not impact. Pressure. As if they had been subjected to a massive force from all sides simultaneously. The kind of force that could crush a chest without leaving external marks. The kind of force that could cause the internal damage seen in the autopsies. Some researchers have pointed to infrasound as a possible explanation. Low-frequency sound waves that can cause panic, disorientation, and even physical damage. Others have suggested a controlled avalanche. But the snow patterns do not support it. The tent was still standing. The footprints were still visible. And neither explains the lights. Neither explains the radiation. Neither explains why the Soviet government classified everything and ordered silence. The declassified files contain one more piece of evidence that changes everything. A photograph. One of the last photos taken by the hikers. It shows a dark shape in the sky. Blurry. Indistinct. But unmistakably not a cloud. Not a plane. Not anything that should have been there. The negative was analyzed by modern experts. It shows no signs of tampering. It was taken on February 1, 1959. Hours before the group died. And whatever it was watching them. The official investigation was closed in May 1959. 3 months after the bodies were found. The conclusion was a compelling natural force. That was the phrase they used. A compelling natural force. It explained nothing. It justified nothing. And it allowed the Soviet government to seal the files and move on. But why? Why classify witness testimony about lights in the sky? Why confiscate radioactive clothing? Why order the lead investigator to remain silent? If this was just an avalanche, just hypothermia, just a tragic accident, why the secrecy? The declassified files suggest an answer. And it has nothing to do with aliens or monsters. It has to do with the Soviet military and the Cold War. In 1959, the Soviet Union was testing parachute mines in the Ural Mountains. These were devices designed to descend slowly from the sky and detonate above the ground. The tests were secret. The locations were classified. And the description of the orange lights matches exactly what witnesses would see if a parachute mine was descending with a burning fuse. The force of such a detonation could cause the internal injuries seen in the 4 bodies in the ravine. The panic caused by such an event could explain why 9 experienced hikers cut their way out of their tent and ran into the night. The radiation could be explained by the materials in the mines. And the Soviet government would have every reason to cover it up. A military test gone wrong. 9 Soviet citizens dead. The embarrassment. The liability. The Cold War was at its height. The Americans could not know about the tests. The families could not know the truth. So they buried it. They called it a compelling natural force. And they hoped the world would forget. But the world did not forget. And now, with the files declassified, we can see the pattern. The injuries that do not match an avalanche. The lights that do not match any natural phenomenon. The radiation that does not match background levels. The orders to silence investigators. The confiscation of evidence. It all points to the same conclusion. Something happened on Dead Mountain that night. Something the Soviet government caused. And something they hid for over 60 years. The Dyatlov 9 were not victims of nature. They were victims of secrecy. Of a system that valued military testing over human life. Of a government that would rather classify the truth than admit a mistake. Here is what you need to remember. First, the injuries to the 4 bodies in the ravine were caused by massive force, not cold, not falls, not an avalanche. Second, multiple witnesses saw orange lights in the sky that night, testimony that was classified and buried. Third, the Soviet government ordered the investigation closed and the evidence confiscated, not because they did not know what happened, but because they did. The Dyatlov Pass incident is not an unsolved mystery. It is a solved mystery with a classified solution. And the solution is that 9 people died because their government was testing weapons in secret and chose to hide the truth rather than honor their memory. If this story moved you, hit like and leave a comment with what shocked you most. Was it the injuries? The lights? The cover-up? And if you want to know what other secrets have been buried by governments around the world, subscribe and hit the bell. Because next time, we are going to a place where hundreds of people vanished without a trace, and the official explanation makes even less sense than this one. The truth is out there. But someone has to dig for it.